hate people. I've been scared of them practically my whole life. The people I loved, people I trusted, have done their absolute worst to me. And for a long time, that's all I ever knew. Society deserves to be hated for everything you said they did and more. You fuck every last one of them for what we've all been through. But then, there are some people out there, but they refuse to let you hate them. In fact, they care about you in spite of it. They're relentless at it. They don't abandon you, no matter how many reasons you give them. No matter how much you're practically begging them to leave. And you want to know why? Because they feel something for me that I can't. They love me. And for all the pain I've been through, that heals me. We do fucked up things to each other, and we hurt each other, and it gets messy. But that's just us. In any world you're in, we're all told we don't stand a chance. And yet, we stand. We break. But we keep going. And that is not a flaw. That's what makes us. So no, I will not give up on this world. And if you can't see why, then I speak for everyone when I say, fuck you!
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Heresy shouldn't be this much fun, but it is. It just is. Especially when we of the broken places know we're not alone, and we were made for these broken times when society is broken under the weight of its own iniquity and absurdity. This is all reflected in the intro clip you heard from Mr. Robot. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made, and they can't even check out any time they want, and still can't leave this cosmic Hotel California. But we veterans of 1,000 psychic wars can, because we have each other in our maze of magic and madness, can thrive in this age of Hermes, Philip K. Dick world, and Gnostic times. Have the means to connect with our higher selves.
This world you made will always be broken. Just like you.
It's raining gnosis, hallelujah. And as Mark Twain once said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. We all have a sacred purpose, you see, because we know so much and have traveled so far for that liberating spiritual tech called Gnosis. Or as Gilles Gispel said about Gnosis, we have, quote, gone through the inferno of matter and the purgatory of morals to arrive at the spiritual paradise.
You think I am a devil, but only because I have lived in hell.
Welcome, you shining crazy diamonds. You are amazing and are full of so much potential, empathy, and destiny, while the meat sacks falter as the Kali Yuga finger bangs to oblivion, the last of their respectability. It's all fun and games until someone loses a third eye, and then it's just gnosis.
Birth is a curse and existence is a prison.
It's raining gnosis, hallelujah, indeed. But there is also an abundance of eldritch tools for wholeness, here at Aeon Byte, making it easy to finally find out why you were born. This episode is no exception, as we are once again joined by the amazing Gary Lachman, discussing his fantastic but practical new book, Dreaming Ahead of Time, Experiences with Precognitive Dreams, Synchronicity, and Coincidence. Get that data to further grant you a robust prescription of psychospiritual panaceas you need right now to unleash your inner Prometheus and indwelling Pallas Athena.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Gary always delivers, and I'm so grateful for everything he's done to provide keys in the Black Iron Prison. Let society collapse as Mr. Robot predicted. Let the world burn with the wrath of angry but irrelevant gods. No one here gets out alive, but we transcend because we are understanding why we were born.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Describing us perfectly, Gary Lachman did write in his Colin Wilson biography, Beyond the Robot, this: "The outsider is someone who sees too deep and too much, and that most of what he sees is chaos. He or she lives in the world with a sense of strangeness and unreality. The safe, stable reality that most of us perceive is for the outsider an illusion, a facade obscuring a more dangerous and threatening possibility, that of nothingness, nihilism, and the void. The complete inconsequentiality of human life and all its achievements. For the outsider, the values and meanings that constitute life for most people, a good job, a big home, a nice bank account, are empty and makeshift. They are at best attempts to gloss over, to make look civilized and rational something that is savage, unorganized, irrational. He stands for reality. He seeks a meaning and purpose that the everyday world cannot provide. And his salvation lies in understanding this and embracing it with total conviction." And I like what Gary further writes in the book, saying that gnosis is a recognition that life does not lead to anything, but is an escape from something.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
A member of my Discord channel made some sentient meat remark the other day. He claimed that all of life's problems are due to free will. Yeah, sure, I countered. But what is the point of free will without awareness, without a state of wakefulness? If we have no gnosis, embrace no theurgy, and do not delve into hermetic reason, if we fall under the brutal propaganda of the deep state, allow the raping of corporatocracy marketing, cannot reject the mind virus of societal conditioning, all the free will in the world isn't gonna be worth a hill of beans.
This is a marketing holocaust. 24 hours a day. For the rest of our lives, the powers that be are hard at work, dumbing us to death.
In Frank Miller's The Dark Knight 2, Jimmy Olsen is thrown in jail for exposing the fascist forces secretly controlling the USA, as well as controlling Superman and the rest of the Justice League. Brainiac asks Lex Luthor, the head of the plutocracy, what should they do with Jimmy Olsen? Luther simply replies, "Release him. Free speech is a wonderful thing, so long as nobody's listening." The Archons also say free will is a wonderful thing, so long as no one is tapping into the choir of the aeons.
See, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be.
Get it? That's why listening to Aeon Bide and other alternative media is so essential, because mass media has permanently destroyed the psyche of Western man. It's over. Society's collapsing. But we still have each other and the nuclear reactor that is Gnosis. On a side note, in the secret book of John, as some of you may know, there is an archon assigned not just for the stars and planets or to infect our brains, but for every part of our body. Tells you how encompassing the power of Yaldi-Baldi is, eh? Free will ain't gonna be much without breaking out of this complete colonization by Wetiko.
There's only one hell, Princess. The one we live in now.
Anyway, there are even archons who oversee the vagina, penis, testicles, and right butt cheek. Guess what? The secret book of John doesn't provide an archon for the left butt cheek. Could that be the weakness in the demiurge's control? Like the flaw in the Death Star? Where is the bloody angel in charge of the left butt cheek? Was he part of the Great Resignation or went on strike? Does one of us need to ascend and take over the left butt cheek to infiltrate and destroy Yaldabao's simulation? Would you like to volunteer? Should we begin a left butt cheek rebellion?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Let me know. In the meantime, you outsiders, led us to another stellar chat with Gary Lachman. Write your own gospel and live your own myth, so you can finally find out why you were born and sit comfortably on your left butt cheek.
What is it about society that disappoints you so much?
Oh, I don't know. Is it that we collectively thought Steve Jobs was a great man, even when we knew he made billions off the backs of children? Or maybe it's that it feels like all our heroes are counterfeit. The world itself's just one big hoax. Spamming each other with our running commentary bullshit masquerading as insight. Our social media faking as intimacy. Or is it that we voted for this? Not with our rigged elections, but with our things, our property, our money. I'm not saying anything new. We all know why we do this. Not because Hunger Games books makes us happy, but because we want to be sedated. Because it's painful not to pretend. Because we're cowards. Fuck society.
Elliot, you're not saying anything. What's wrong?
Nothing.
This is the Aeon Bide interview, and with us we have the pleasure, always have the pleasure, being joined by Gary Lachman, this time to discuss his book, Dreaming Ahead of Time, Experiences with Precognitive Dreams, Synchronicity, and Coincidence. Gary, thank you very much, as always, for coming on the show.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure, Miguel. Thank you very much.
And with us, too, always a pleasure, too, is having the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
I'm very well, and good to see Gary back here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, dreams. Been dreaming about this show.
You weren't dreaming of Jeannie?
No, I used to.
Yeah, we all did, I think, at some point.
Yep.
Well, Gary, so what, I guess we can start. What made you decide to write this book? I believe it came to you in the spring of 2019 in a very different world.
Yes, well, here in London, I'm often invited to give talks. There's a group called the Curious Invitation, and they do these site-specific talks. And one of the sites I've done talks with them has been several cemeteries in London. There was a famous one over in the west side called the Brompton Cemetery. And this was during a series that they called the Borderlands of Sleep. And so I gave a talk about hypnagogia, which is the in-between state. As you're falling asleep, we drift into this half-dream state before we, fall into full-on sleep. And many people over the years have been aware of this and been able to prolong it. And in that state, strange things can happen. You see dreams starting to form. You can hear voices saying things. But it's also a state that's fairly populated by paranormal or parapsychological kind of phenomena. And after taking the audience through kind of potted history of hypnagogia and a variety of different people like Swedenborg and Jung and Steiner and many, many others, Uspensky and in the esoteric world, plus others as well, I tagged on a few experiences of my own in the hypnagogic state, but also I tagged on this notion of precognitive dreams. And it was originally sort of just to fill up some space on the talk. And I talked about people like J.W. Dunne, who wrote this book in the 1920s called An Experiment with Time. And Dunne wasn't an occultist or anyone into anything like parapsychology. He was an aeronautics engineer. But he found out by chance, purely by chance, that he actually saw the future, bits and pieces of the future in his dream. Not so much that he predicted anything, that it just, sort of random bits of his future would turn up in his dreams, and so on. And I talked about some other people. And I had read Dunne's book ages ago, back in 1980, and I did what he did. I just started writing my dreams down, and lo and behold, I started discovering that, it's exactly what he said. All these strange bits of the future turned up. And so I added that on at the talk. And then the funny thing was, the next day, I went on to Twitter, and the first post I saw was someone who had been at the talk. It was a woman, and she wrote OMG with, a few exclamation points. It's true. And she, whatever, I'd been to this talk about, dreaming the future, and this is what happened. And she said that she had, in a dream that night after my talk, she had picked a hedgehog up off the road, and hedgehogs are these strange animals that are very common here in the UK, and picked it up and took it off the road and put it onto the pavement where it would be safe. It wouldn't get run over. And she said the first thing she saw in her Twitter feed was a post about how to protect the hedgehogs. And she said, oh my God, the very first thing I saw in the morning was exactly like the dream. And I thought, okay, maybe that's a sign, in a way. And so, just before, that would have been spring when I had the talk. And so just before COVID came to town here, at the end of 2019, I talked to my publisher about doing it. And then during the first lockdown here in the spring into summer of 2020, that's when I wrote the book.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I love how you share your experiences. I mean, you and I have had many interviews. I've read all of your books, except I believe Uspensky is the only one I have not read. And it was nice reading about your precognitions, your dream work, your synchronicities. And I was like, oh, wow, Gary is finally showing the world his mystical side. But then I was thinking, wait a second. No, Gary's just showing his human side, right? This is all just part of being a regular human being when you think about it.
Well, yeah, I'm not claiming any particular credit for this, as this is one of the things that Dunne said as well. He said that he initially thought that it was some strange, anomaly that he was particularly, subject to. But then again, through someone or something else, that get the stories in a hospital, and you overhear some conversation about something, and he realizes, someone else is doing this too. So, had he gone into, reading about it in, the literature at the time, even in, the thing is, we're talking about time. So the book came out in the 1920s. A lot of his experiences were from much earlier. So I was about to say, he could have read in the literature, he would have come upon more examples of the phenomena. But even at that time, there was enough literature about it in some degree. But he says he doesn't do that and any of that sort of thing. So I just, it happened. It's been, I've been recording these dreams for 40 years. I mean, I went back to write the book. I pulled all these old dream journals out going back to 1980. Just out of those pulled out all the ones that were precognitive, and then I sifted through and it's sort of the best ones. And I mean, strange things happen. I mean, one of the strange things that I mentioned in the book is that while I was going through the material in these old dreams, I came across a dream from 1998 in which I'm told, stay at home, don't go out. There's no reason to go out, stay at home where you're safe. And this was exactly the message that was being, broadcast on all the media everywhere, during the first COVID lockdown. So it was like, so I mean, was that a precognitive dream that I didn't know was precognitive until I came across it looking for precognitive dreams? Yeah. Or was it a synchronicity that, as I'm looking for precognitive dreams, I came across a dream that, and so, I mean, all that kind of time displacement sort of thing, that Dunne sort of got that going. And there's, quite a few, I mean, he had quite a vogue back in the 20s and 30s. And even people like H.G. Wells, I mean, who, invented time travel in the sense with the time machine. But a later book of Wells is called The Shape of Things to Come. From that film, Things to Come was made in the 1930s. He uses Dunne's ideas about seeing the future in the dream, and Philip Raven, who's the kind of the character insofar as there is one in Shape of Things to Come, he has these series of dreams, but the far future and the history of the civilization and all that sort of thing. And again, J.B. Priestley, who's not as well known these days, but in the last century he was very well known and popular English writer, and he wrote a series of plays called Time Plays, Time in the Conways, I Have Been Here Before, that deal with Dunne's ideas. And also, you mentioned Ouspensky's ideas about eternal recurrence and sort of six-dimensional time. So, I mean, what I do is I have a kind of opening chapter where I say, well, look, here's all these dreams that I've taken out of, my journals. And I have to say, there's one in particular, which I just seem to me as kind of, I can't see how anyone can get around it. Or I don't see anyone can get around to the other ones. And I mean, I know it's all anecdotal, but at the same time, if you read up on it, contemporary parapsychology, people like Gene Radin, in his book Real Magic, there's the statistical evidence for precognition is in, and there's even a precog economy, where there's brokers, Wall Street or city bankers here who employ precognitive people to check out things. So it's something that's taken seriously in serious kind of places, and I'm just saying, here's all these ones that happened to me. But the one that I was going to say is in 1990, I dreamed in advance 2 specific scenes and the plot from the 1994 film The Shadow with Alec Baldwin. And I mean, it was just sort of, I say in the book, there's a scene where, I don't know if you know the film, it's an early superhero film, and the special effects seem, creaky and ancient for us. But there's a scene where, and if you know the story, The Shadow is this 1930s pulp kind of character. He's, I guess, a superhero in a way, but he's been to Tibet and he's learned how to cloud men's mind, and he has sort of magic powers, but he can sort of make himself a shadow. He can become 2-dimensional. And there's a scene in the film where he's doing that. He's sliding along a wall as a 2-dimensional figure, and then he steps out of it. It becomes 3D. And in this dream I had, it was exactly that. And there's another scene where he has his gun, which is a .45. That's that sort of insignia of the Shadow, is this 45. And there's a scene where he's it's just a gun, and then it's reflected in a sort of hall of mirrors, and that scene as well. But the clincher for me was that the film revolves around an attempt by this villain to blow up New York with something called the beryllium sphere. And in the dream itself, I dreamt that the story had to do with the sphere. The Shadow had to stop the villain from, doing something with the sphere. So, how could this happen? I hope somebody has a halfway acceptable explanation for it, that it does happen. It's just there. We live in a world where these sorts of things happen. So.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about, you've written about it, how there was a time when our brain wasn't split, when we were more precognitive. I mean, you talk about like, in some of your works, Owen Barfield, talking about how language changed reality. So it's nice to see that this is a natural, really state of human beings, just like a dog can detect a tsunami hours before it hits. You know, we're more, as you've written, to be more embedded in reality and outside of the flow of linear time, which is not woo-woo or new agey, but the natural state of human being. You even, I love, even Dunne, you write that he had a dream where 4,000 people died. And then he found out that it kind of came true. Is actually 40,000 people died in Mount Pelée in Martinique. So even he was seeing that this is, again, just being a human being.
Well, I mean, the sense that what he discovered was that in the dreams, it's not as if he's hovering over a kind of landscape, the future, and he can look left and right and see, you know, the future. Oh, what's happening there? The future. It's his own future. And likewise, myself, it's what is going to happen to me in the next day or whatever, or next hour sometimes, or week or month. And that example, I mean, yeah, this was he dreamt that he was on an island and he saw, you know, cracks and fissures opening up, and he realized there was going to be a volcano, and he was trying to get the French authorities who were running the island to pay attention to him. And he was saying 4,000 people are going to be killed. What he later discovered was that he had misread the newspaper headline in the dream itself. So when you say it's just like normal, it's normal in the sense that he says, if you do what I've done, if you bother to write down your dreams and, you know, do it consistently over time, you will come across this phenomenon. And it's not as if you wake up knowing that you've had a precognitive dream. It's not premonitions, it's not prophecies or predictions, even though that these are all related. Obviously, the pre-prefix, the pre-prefix, as it were. But it's, as I said, you would only know that you had dreamt a bit of the future, or a bit of the future had turned up in your dream, had you written it down and paid attention to it. And, you know, there's people today, I mean, there's, you know, who are trying to argue that, yes, in the way you're saying, yes, it's a natural phenomenon, some way backward causation, and somehow, because in the real world, so-called real world of physics and so on, past, present, and future don't exist. You know, so there's, you know, whatever, there's just kind of some kind of now that is just happening, irrespective of what we experience as past, present, and future. And fine and dandy. I mean, but Einstein had to set his alarm clock, you know, in the morning anyway. You know, I mean, we all, no matter what we may be happening on this micro level, elementary level, in the macro world, we still, you know, anticipate a future. There is a past. So it is strange for us. I think in some ways we're inured to it because we're inundated with time travel sorts of stuff on you know, Netflix or whatever, these streaming, and even that is an example of our different relation to time. And the one thing I regret about the book is I wasn't able to bring in, or I didn't think to bring in, or at least mention the work of Jean Gebser, who's a Swiss German philosopher from the last century that I talk about in my other books. But he said our time, he died in the early 70s, but he said what was coming on its way is what he called the eruption of time. And that time was going to play a much bigger part in just everything, in the whole culture and civilization. And when you think about things like Netflix or podcasts or a variety of different things now, where all of this sort of material, you know, this content is available at any time and at any place. I mean, I'm from the ancient old world when I was a kid, if I wanted to watch something on television, I had to be home at a certain time, sitting in front of the television. And there was no such thing as recording it or anything like that. But now all that is just, you know, that's a thing of the past. And so even in that banal, everyday kind of way, our relation to time has changed. But I do think in another way, it inures us to like how strange precognition actually is, even though it happens a lot. But when you think about it, how can it happen? And I'm not convinced by any of the, you know, sort of quantum explanations that bring in positrons or whatever. I'm not saying they don't have anything to do with it, but it's like fine, but it's I'm not a positron, and I'm a human being who like wakes up and then has this dream, and then like, how did that happen?
Right.
How did it happen? And it also seems to have happened, at least in my case, it's like a tap that sometimes gets turned on or opened up quite a bit, and a lot of it happens. It kind of pops and crackles around, and then other times it's not happening at all. And that, like, the related phenomenon of synchronicity is, which Jung uses as his all-purpose kind of stencil to put over, all paranormal, kind of phenomena. But that's obviously related to precognition as well.
Well said. And on a side note, I wanted to ask you, because I didn't even know this, but I think it's so cool, Gary, that you started a band called The Nose based on your interest in Gnosticism. I think that's awesome. How did that happen?
Oh, well, yeah, I just had it. That was the name of my band, The No, K-N-O-W. When I left Blondie in late 77, and, as a young man, very forthright and wanting to have, be my own front man and all that. And so I put a band together. Just was a 3-piece, myself, bass and guitar, and bass and drum. And I played guitar and sang and wrote most of the songs. But I was reading lots about Gnosticism, and I also was seeing Stefan Heller's lectures at the Philosophical Research Society when Manly P. Hall was still around.
Yeah.
So this was like about 78. 70, late 77, 78 into 79. And, we didn't get a big deal, but we put out a single, and we were a bi-coastal band in LA and in New York and back and forth. And so, we played a lot. And actually, songs at the time I was writing, they were becoming more and more informed by my reading and all this sort of stuff. And precisely because I was reading about all these sorts of things that I outgrew, playing rock. I said in my book, New York Rocker, My Life in the Blank Generation, about all this, that I got too smart for rock and roll, because you get a certain point and you want to express, but the ideas that you want to express, they kind of exceed the medium that you've been working in, 2-minute, 3-minute pop songs. Although, but some songs, unfortunately, some of them, they turned up on, there's a CD that I put together quite some time ago now called Tomorrow Belongs to You, which was one of the songs I did. So some of the material from that band, there's a song called In the Know, that's about sort of what we're, just talking about. So yeah, it's strange. And, but that was it. After I did that, then I sort of dropped out. And then the last thing I did at that time, I played with Iggy Pop for a year on 2 North American tours, just as a hired gun. It was sort of like the Wild Bunch, that film.
Very cool. And your songs then have themes like Yaldabaoth and Valentinus, anything like that, or you
no, not so much. But it's about being in the know, so sort of not straightforward, it was subtle. It was subtle. So you sort of had to kind of know about it in a way to get the hint. But as I said, it's at least for me. When I was writing songs, they just came out. But that's what lyric, being a lyric poet, as it were, a singer, you're singing your soul, so it just sort of comes out. But then I sort of outgrew that. It took me quite a while to learn how to write, assuming I know now. But it's a good decade between dropping out of music to starting to write articles and book reviews and all of that, and then almost another decade before actual book coming out. So it took a long time.
Yeah, excuse me. There's the garbage truck is right now in front of the house. Always happens in the middle of it.
You sure that isn't listener response?
I'm sure you'd be familiar from your days in New York how loud it can be, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, God. Oh, your garbage truck. You're lucky. Oh, sorry. Had to train the rats to eat everything.
Oh my God, yes, and the train, and the subway. Oh my God, yeah. Never a dull moment. And well, as I scream over this garbage truck, What would you say are some of your more remarkable first dreams or dreams that informed you? I really like your dream of King Kong and the UFO and your days as a punk rocker.
Well, yeah, I start out the book just saying about how I can't remember any dreams from, say, my childhood. Although people like Jung, if you know his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, it's all about his dreams, and he starts out, these strangely, complex dreams when he was, a child.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, ones I can remember the earlier. So around this time, and I first was playing in New York, and I say there's one where I'm on King Kong's shoulder, holding on to his fur, and he's swimming through the Hudson, and it's like he's just circling New York. And I'm like, yes, and I must have, when you think about, I must have felt top of the world or whatever, around that time, because this was when I'm, first, I don't know, 19 or so in New York, playing in Blondie, who, we were the band that opened for anyone then, but, we later became, very big. And then there's other dreams about like the UFO motherships, before Close Encounters had been made. Flying over New York and all that. But the thing about those is these the vividness of the dreams. I mean, Ouspensky talks about the dream artist. Ouspensky was somebody who investigated this hypnagogic state in the early 20th century. I mean, he was doing lots of interesting stuff before he got involved with Gurdjieff, and that's one of the things that gets missed about him. And that's precisely why I wrote the book, to point these things out. But he was doing very interesting experiments or self-observation in the dream state, and what he remarked on was just the incredible creative powers of the dream artist, and the kind of reality that whoever, and I say that, I mean, I come to feel that it's more of a who than a what. That's behind the dreams happening in some way. It's just the feeling, because there's a certain intelligence again, but I don't know a better word to use, but it's sort of after, and you must know this, after time you observe these things, you pay attention, and you realize there's patterns, and it's not just random and kind of gobbledygook. Yeah, I mean, that was about those dreams. It's just this incredible vivid reality, which puts all our attempts with HD and VR and all that, just puts those to shame. Because and then obviously when you have the lucid dream, I mean, which I've had some, but I mean the earliest, I remember, I still can kind of taste the earliest one, which I mentioned in the book, where I'm with the friend at the time, and sort of I turned to him and said, "This is a dream, isn't it?" And he turns to me and says, "Yes, it is." It was sort of like everything kind of opens up, around me, and it seemed like like doors or whatever walls had gone down, and suddenly there were this very vast horizons and all that. So, I mean, dreams have, listeners must, they must all know this. They have this remarkable power to, you have enhanced responses to things too. So your emotions are very powerful in it. But if you dream in colors can be, quite remarkable. I should say the sort of the outline of things is very, very sharp. And this was one of the ways in which, it's said that you can learn to trigger a lucid dream is by sort of recognizing that things seem a bit more vivid and sharp in the dream than in your everyday kind of experience. But yeah, I mean, those, and then I said a variety of different dreams where I don't know. I mean, there's so many in the book. It's difficult to sort of pick. But the thing about them is that they're, for the most part, they're about trivial things. I mean, the ones we hear about, the precognitive dreams we hear about, or the premonitions, or the ones that seem to predict disaster. And I mean, there's many around 911 here in the UK. In the 1960s, there was a horrible tragedy called the Aberfan disaster in Wales, where a kind of coal slip opened up and engulfed this town and a school, and it killed many people. But someone who was in helping, who was part of the the people helping there, they were interested in parapsychology, and they got the newspaper, the Evening Standard, to sort of put in a questionnaire of anyone who had any dreams prior to the disaster, and there were quite a few, and so but those are the ones we hear about. But the sort of thing that I'm writing about in the book is that they're all sort of trivial kinds of things. They're nothing that the only person who would be interested in the dreams if they weren't precognitive could possibly be your therapist. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's usually nothing about the dream itself that is particularly interesting. They're not big archetypal dreams or anything like that. It's just they stand out because how did this get displaced? And all that raises all these questions about free will, all that kind of thing. And I look into that, looking at, Dunne tried to explain his experience with a philosophy he developed called serialism, which is basically, it requires a kind of endless numbers of different kinds of time and different observers, different levels. So there's us, everyday us in the everyday world. We got our nose down to the present moment, and we see time in this very one way trajectory. So the past is behind us, the future's ahead. We're on that track, and that's what we do. But when we sleep, we get out of that harness somehow, and then there's what Dunne calls time two, or there's observer two, which is you, but a bigger you that encompasses the everyday observer one and time one. And in time two, in the dream, you rise up above that one-way track, and you can look in both directions. You can see the future ahead of time. But you go in the past, and that's why dreams can often be a combination of past events or and future ones as well. And again, if you don't write them down and you don't pay attention, you'll miss it, because it is trivial little things. But then he also posits, like, okay, there's another, because that's why it's called serialism. It's kind of the horrible, philosophical horror of the endless regress. You always have to have somebody else, another level of time, and so on and so on. But somebody who didn't care for serialism as a whole, but he thought the first three of Dunne's observers were very useful. This is J.B. Priestley. And he said, well, we have everyday I, who's stuck in the present moment. Then I dream me, observer two, I'm up in this other level, or I can look around in both directions, past and future. Observer three is the one who can act, who can actually, decide when the future event that you had dreamt about comes to pass, what to do. And he gives the example of a woman who dreamed that she was camping, and she had her baby, and she went to the stream to wash something, and she forgot something, went back to the tent, and by the time she got back to the stream, the baby had drowned. And so, lo and behold, when she did find herself camping, and she did find herself at the stream, she remembered the dream, and she went back. When she went back to the tent, she took the baby with her. So you might argue, well, it wasn't really a precognitive dream because the baby didn't die.
Right.
But you might say, well, no, she was given up front, this is one possible future, But if you know in advance, you can change it. And so, I believe there's enough, wiggle room, whatever you call it, to be able to get around the free will sort of problem with this, because that's one of the things where, okay, if you know in advance somehow this is happening, then everything is kind of predestined and all that. So or feelings about free will are illusory, and that can't be the case, I would say.
Yeah, it can get very complicated. It seems dreams are still a mystery, and as you write, it's connected to synchronicity, precognition, free will. It's almost like you have to time. As you said, time is now an important issue, and it can get complicated. I love this quote you put by St. Augustine, when they ask him about time. And he said, if I am not asked the question, I know the answer. Sometimes I feel that's probably the best attitude, huh?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to be, well, I say you have to sort of be a philosopher. Even I even say that it's like, yes, we think we all know what time is. It's what we don't have enough of, and it's what we run out of when whatever we haven't put money in the parking meter or so on and so on. But if you ask in that kind of philosophical sense, what is time? We find ourselves befuddled very quickly. And that's a test whether you're a philosopher or not. It's like, well, philosopher won't let go. And they keep thinking, well, no, this can't be right. And yeah, I mean, but that's the sort of thing. It's one of those things where we know it intuitively in some way, but we can't pinpoint it explicitly. But that's why, I mean, again, many things I'm saying in the book have been said before, and it's just that these are the reflections I've been drawn to, trying to understand, this phenomena that I've been recording in my dreams for many, many years. Like how could this possibly happen? And what does it lead us to? I mean, dreams themselves. I mean, the way I look at it in the book is like there's two mysteries I'm looking at. There's mystery of dreams and mystery of time, and then in precognitive dreams, they're both at work there. And that also leads us to, well, mystery of consciousness itself. I mean, in the sense that, yes, you were saying earlier, Barfield and others posit some earlier time in human history, human evolution, when the kind of clear distinction that we experience now as, the waking world and, the rational world, and this is the present and all of that, it wasn't quite like that. It was a bit fuzzier. And that's what the kind of dream consciousness is like. Where these very sharp distinctions don't hold anymore, and so I mean all of this stuff is related. It's all it's fundamentally related to consciousness. And then also, I mean, the way I see it, it's a gradient, because even in our conscious state, we can have strange experiences of time or displacement. I mean, I talk about this phenomenon of time slips, where people find themselves back in the past. But it can even happen just in everyday experience. I talk about when I was writing my book about Madame Blavatsky, and I spent a lot of time reading about Tibet, and she claimed to have been at a secret monastery in the Tashi Lumpo monastery and all that. So I was reading about all that, and then I'd be writing about it, and then at the end of the day, the work day, when I was doing that for several hours, and I would go out, I'd be surprised to find myself in North London. It was sort of like, oh, I just was in Tibet for several hours. And if I don't know if you remember this phenomenon, again, this probably dates me, but I remember, again, when I was a kid, when going to the movies on a Saturday matinee, and then you're in the movie theater for 4 hours or whatever. Yeah. And then you come out and like, oh, it's like you're back.
In a different world.
In reality, it's like, what? Because you just wherever it was, some science fiction film or Western or horror movies.
Well, for me, it was Jackie Chan and those
guys.
Yeah.
So whatever it was. So like I said, but these are things that we take for granted. But when you think about it, it's like, well, I mean, I relate that to what we would say remote viewing or clairvoyance, which is what it is really. It has this upgraded name, remote viewing, because the military is interested in it and all that. But I mean, if in a sense, although physically I was here in my flat, working on the book, mentally I was in Tibet, or whatever, this, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Imaginal Tibet, is that vastly categorically, different from, what we would call remote viewing, where, okay, I'm here and I'm actually trying to, project my consciousness into Tibet or something like that. So all these things overlap, and that's what I'm interested, because when you're saying, oh, it's an everyday experience, well, it is, but it's many ones that we don't really think about them. I mean, many of our everyday experiences already suggest certain kinds of powers and abilities, I guess, of consciousness, to put it that way, that we don't really recognize. And if we thought about them, we would think, oh, actually, that I'm able to do that suggests something about the nature of consciousness.
Well said. Yeah. And as you, I think it's important to know is that, as you're talking about, we can't really know it. We go from Augustine to the philosopher. And your book does an excellent job of showing that regardless, dreams were important, have been important. The ancient Egyptians, as you write, were the first to do dream incubation. From the Babylonians, obviously, we all know from the Hebrew Bible how important dreams are to Joseph and Jacob and so many characters. And the Greeks, it's important. And I think it is important because, as you write, Gary, you say that Jung said that dreams have a compensatory function. They can alert us of imbalances in our psyches or life. And you write, for example, you learn not to argue so much with your ex-wife because of dreams. But so dreams, we can't ignore them because they can really make our lives much better and more whole and help us individuate, going back to Jung.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jung's idea, as you say, dreams have a compensatory function or character. Function is too literal character in the sense that, well, because Jung believes that the psyche aims or grows or moves towards a kind of wholeness, and our everyday ego consciousness awareness is a very particular, very highly, as I said, articulated, very bright kind of bit of a larger bit of the self, and we tend to think that our everyday egos encompass all of our psyche, all the mind, and all the consciousness. But the parts that don't fit into that very brightly lit, focus of awareness, they're still there, and for Jung, they seek expression, and they tend to, in a dream or a fantasy, or even in neuroses, so when they really start to hit you over the head, they compensate for the one-sidedness by bringing in these other sides. And so if you can understand that, I mean, that's a hermeneutic, to put it in some technical term one can use to try and understand or look at the dreams. Okay, so I mean, the Freudian, or let's say the scientific, is like, okay, what made that dream happen? So that's cause and effect. I ate that pizza last night. So that's why I had that dream. I mean, that's one of the ancient ones. Go, yes, you ate that food, and that created, because the organs are said to have dreams themselves. They each have their own kind of dreams, their own kind of expression in the unconscious. That's how we get into prodromal dreams about healing and things of that sort. But that's a very causal. We tend to think, oh, that happened yesterday, so that's why I had that dream last night. Blah, blah, blah. Jung is saying, okay, but how about maybe less like what made the dream happen than what the dream is aiming at itself. So he gives it a positive kind of trajectory. It's teleological. It has an aim. It's purposive, and that's where we get into, it's trying to tell you, would be the vernacular way of expressing this. The dream is trying to say, take a look at this. This is something that you are unconscious of. Remember, we're talking about the unconscious. So this is something we are on. It's not unconscious itself, but we are unconscious of it, or whatever it is. It does not make up a part of our immediate consciousness, but it expresses itself in this other time, in the dream. And so if we pay attention to
Scrooge, right?
Oh yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, that's that's very much it. I mean, I think Christmas carols should be looked at as a kind of alchemical transformative fable.
Oh yeah.
Having to do with time and dreams, and having to do with what Colin Wilson calls Faculty X, other times and places, because he is reminded of his past. He's reminded of his youth. He's reminded of the Arabian Nights. He's reminded of all these things that he has lost track of in his narrow focus on money and so on and so on. So no, I would say that's very much what it's about. Really, it's a kind of secular transformative story. Sadly, it's become sentimentalized and all that, which is not hard to do with Dickens in the first place. But I think it's along those lines. But yeah, I mean that's the way you can read the dream. It's kind of like, okay, and the other way is, this is going back to the Egyptians. You mentioned all the people in the past, the great civilizations in the past, where dreams are very important. The dreams speak in puns. They speak in jokes and plays on words. We all know the big archetypal dreams where whatever I'm on King Kong, and I'm, going through the Hudson. That was a big archetypal dream, whatever. But most of them, they're not necessarily like that. But they tell a story, but they often have a kind of humor to them. And it could be like, sweetening the pill of the knowledge about yourself that you need to know, and they can get it across, in a funny sort of way. And this is something that the Egyptians recognized. But we have to remember, what the Egyptians thought was funny might not go over today, in Las Vegas or whatever, or every night, and as you sleep. So you have to sort of see the humor in your own context. And that's another thing too. It is all of these dream interpretation books, whatever they say about a cat or losing your teeth, it may have meant that at some time in some place, but they're all multiple. They're fluid, the symbols in dreams, and they're very much a part of what's happening to you. And just in the same way that the future you see in the dream is your future, what you are going to see on television. And I have so many of the dreams in the book is about films I saw, what I saw on television, things of that sort. And so it's that kind of thing. So it's what I am going to do, or you are going to do. It's not, I said, it's not generic, the future. It's not Nostradamus. It's not that kind of thing. And likewise in the dream, it's about you, the story, and what the puns and the plays on words and the metaphors are about, or, they're all about communicating some. Well, it's like Jung says, it's getting postcards from some part of yourself, to your conscious mind. Or it's a game of charades where, you have to understand what as I said, it's more of a who than a what. So, I mean, I don't know, George or Edgar, whatever you want to call it, or him or her, or, Baphomet, whatever. But I also think as you address him, her, whatever, so shall he be, addressed. It'll respond in that way too. So I mean, I'm thinking of the early Tarkovsky film Solaris, not the George Clooney remake, but the planet is alive and it responds to the minds of the astronauts, the cosmonauts that are there, and I think who or what, or we need another whatever. I don't know what that is. It's not even I don't know. Is that a pronoun? I don't know. Is behind that. It's something along those lines. And I mean, I know you can go down a rabbit hole that way, and I think that's one thing you need not to do too. Don't look for the signs. If you have to look for the signs, they're not signs. They have to hit you over the head. And then But if you look for it, because you'll find them. You'll find them everywhere. But don't look for them. They have to come to you, and you just be attentive, write your dreams down, pay attention, and you'll see. But you can really go out of your way, off the deep end, finding, symbols and signs and messages everywhere.
Oh, agreed. And Vince, do you have a question for Gary, or what do you think?
Oh, this is great. I'm thinking of Carl Jung and the concept of archetypes, and maybe our futures are archetypes in and of themselves. We usually think of archetypes as more simplistic things, but maybe that's what we do when we swim through our dreams. We're swimming through the archetypes of our future, our possible futures.
Well, it could be. I mean, Jung does the first thing that differentiated Jung from Freud was what he called dreams prospective tendencies, which is like the future oriented. They're teleological. They're like what is coming ahead. So they can give you a sign what's coming ahead. What's percolating in the unconscious before it bubbles up to conscious mind, or what the conscious mind would need to sort of move towards in order to balance out its one-sidedness. But yeah, I mean, I think I mean, as I said, Jung said the unconscious wants to express. It wants to become conscious. It seeks expression. So I mean, it's future in that sense. It has a push towards manifesting and becoming actual. I mean, whether in the sense, well, again, he even says this when in the earliest work, his dissertation on so-called occult phenomena, when he was doing these seances with his cousin, even though he doesn't say she's his cousin in the dissertation, Hilly Preiswerk. And amidst all these different voices that come up, she was like, had the voice of their grandfather or great grandfather and other, dead relatives and things of that sort. Was a future voice. There's a woman, a female voice, Ivaness, and this was a much more mature, one would say individuated kind of character, personality than Heli was herself. And Jung thought that this was, some, how you say, better her, as it were, kind of more mature, more, kind of fulfilled personality that was there that could come to, fruition. And so on. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's one of the things, because again, we really tend to think, how should we say it, in this kind of push from behind. Oh, what made that dream happen, rather than like, oh, what might it be pointing toward?
Yeah, the materialistic has been. I was also wondering what you thought about, and you haven't mentioned so far. Maybe you mentioned in the book, visitation dreams. Some things I call visitation of people that have passed on. I've had 3 of them, and they're different than any other dream. They're like the presence of that person is there in a way that
very intense.
Yeah. I even had one with John Lennon.
Oh, really? I mean, so you mean with a dead person? Coming to your dream. Well, I only name check it in the book, but I don't go into detail, and there is a great detail. But I do say about the strange dream I had about Rudolf Steiner.
Oh,
and I really felt that it was really Rudolf Steiner in the dream.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was one of the most vivid dreams I've had. It's a dream that stayed, one of these dreams that stayed with me. And again, I can't go into the detail. Not that I want to keep it secret. It's just that it's one of those dreams where it's kind of like got to tell the story to get to the point. But it's like he had this face of infinite understanding and patience about something. That was it was like, I don't know, comfort wasn't even like the right word. And I remember I did have a conversation with Colin Wilson once back when I first moved here in the late 90s, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, yeah, it probably was Steiner. It was like very kind of, yeah, it probably was. And at the time I had the dream, I was reading a lot of books about Steiner, and I was reading a lot about anthroposophy, and this was before I wrote about him and anything. This was I just when I was working at this bookshop in LA, a metaphysical bookshop, and they had a huge wall of anthroposophical stuff, and I just was reading a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, in my dream, John Lennon, I used to love John Lennon when I was a teenager. I was a guitar player. Still am, actually. But then as I got older, I got mad at him because, I associated him with, Karl Marx and things like that. And it really is because of his glasses, probably, or whatever. And then what happened is, in this dream, John Lennon came, and we were just kind of hanging out and playing in the guitar. He wanted to come up and play, and he sat me down, and I don't remember the exact words in the dream, but when I woke up, I realized that I had him all wrong. And to this day, my attitude changed overnight about him. And then when I started looking at what he really thought and believed, I said, wow, he's like me, Isn't that weird?
Well, we'll talk about compensation,
Yeah.
Your attitude was one-sided and narrow about it, and I mean, Jung or Jungian. I might guess. I'm not a psychotherapist, psychologist, so I just write about this stuff. But I would think they would suggest that was some archetype of the self coming to you to show this other side, and I mean, not putting aside, it may very well have been. I mean, and that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing when we get into this other world. I mean, we have all these phrases that were just handed down. Oh, it's just a dream. It was only a dream, or in your dreams. And of course, we know what that means. There's a different. If I dream that I'm run over by a car, it's very different than I walk out my door and I am run over by a car. I mean, we all know that. So I mean, that we can put that to bed, but. At the same time, there is something more about them. So, I don't know. There's a wonderful, I think it was called The Way of the Dream, talking about Jung. There's a wonderful, this is back in the video days, I'm sure it's I was going to say DVD, but it's probably streaming now. I think it was called The Way of the Dream. And people like Marie-Louise von Franz, who was one of the great, Jungians, and others, talk about, dreams and people's dreams. And again, you have to, in one way, they're all very interesting, but they're also sort of like people's drug trips. And if you've heard one or two, it gets kind of like, okay, yeah, well, let me tell you, man, that time I took blah, blah, blah. And then, so they get kind of samey after a while. But if you remember that they say something, about you, or just the in a way, it doesn't, just the fact that you had John Lennon come to you in a dream and sit you down and say, hey, mate, let me clear this up. That's utterly fantastic.
Yeah.
It's interesting as you're saying they're psychedelic. Yeah, what's the old joke? Everybody always says, man, I had the weirdest dream. Nobody ever says, man, I had the most boring dream or banal dream. It's always something just like everybody's a reincarnation of Cleopatra or Napoleon.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's one reason when I worked at this bookshop, I had a perverse inclination towards eternal recurrence. Instead of reincarnation, it's exactly the same life over and over again all the time. And the customers didn't care for that too much. But yeah, but I said most dreams are very banal. They're very boring. These big archetypal dreams are few and far between, and they're numinous, and that's why they stand out when we have them. If you have them all the time, well, this is my 25th, big mystical experience, and it's like, well, how different was it from your 24th? It's like these things are supposed to have an impact on our everyday life. They affect us. They give us a kind of picture of things that we might not be able to have had they not happened, and they inform us, and we carry on. And not to say you shouldn't explore it, of course, but it can easily become a kind of, I don't know, what do you want to call it, kind of psychic entertainment. In one sense, the lucid dream manuals and things of that sort, where your conscious mind can start directing the dreams. That can happen. But for Jung, you would say, well, actually, you're interfering with this natural process. The whole point of the dream is something other than you, or your everyday you. I want this. I don't like that. Oh, I want to, whatever, in my dream, I want to sleep in so-and-so or be president or whatever it is. You're kind of colonizing this other part of you, and the bigger you, with the capital Y, the self, capital S, that is here's some stuff maybe you, every day you needs to know about. So instead of, and in some ways you could argue that's a left brain kind of, attempt to, what's the word, kind of make utilitarian use out of something that just should be kind of left to itself, to express. So I understand it, and I said when it happens, it's remarkable. But I think there's a kind of, what would you say, a kind of a bone to pick there among people in the dream community. Whether you control them or allow them to happen and pay attention to them. Because one of the things about the hypnagogic that people outside, just mainstream psychologists, a fellow named Herbert Silberer, who was an early Freudian and also knew Jung. He discovered that the hypnagogic is self-symbolic. And so the voices you hear, the images you see, and things of that sort, they are symbolic of either your state of mind, your emotional state, even your physical state, what you were just thinking about, or you're happy or angry about something, or whatever, your liver's acting up. It's not random. And this is so. Even if you just start from that, as you're falling asleep, if you pay attention to this, what Wilson Van Dusen, a psychiatrist but also a reader of Swedenborg, said, fragile fringe phenomena is the stuff that happens sort of like on the periphery as you're starting to fall asleep. You hear voices and I have at the beginning of the book, I have a line that I heard drifting off in hypnagogia. I think it's Lord, help me believe in the primary dreams of which my life is made. So I had just heard that sentence as I was falling asleep, one night. And so, all that sort of stuff happens if you pay attention to it. And I would say this is the outskirts of the inner world, put it that way, or the inskirts. Nobody ever goes to the inskirts of town, do they?
No.
But it's sort of, I would say this is like the fringe of it, we're so fixed on having our consciousness focused on the outside, well, Plato would say it's the cave, with the shadows, or it's the false world. But if we can somehow start to pay attention to all this phenomena happening in the inner space, we become aware that it's an inner space.
Awesome. Well, we are at the end. For the audience, I highly recommend you get Dreaming Ahead of Time. If you want more information on Gary and all his great books, which I've mentioned, I've read them all except Uspensky. I need to do something about that. But go to garylachman.co.uk. Information on his new book and website will be on the show notes as always. And first of all, Vance, thanks for keeping us company.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a very dreamy interview. Too bad we've run out of time. Huh?
The Pink Floyd song, ticking away the moments.
Right, well, another time, and we can pick it up from there. So, yes.
Wonderful.
Very good to hear from you both, and dream well.
Thank you. Always enjoy having you here, Gary, and good luck with everything.
All right, cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.
And there you have it, oh, you spiritual entrepreneurs. Gary never disappoints. You had a precognition on how good this interview would be. In our second part, Gary will talk about the hypnagogic state and how you can reach it to see behind so many veils. He'll give us a passionate discourse on why free will does exist and what is wrong with those who contend we live in a block universe. Then Gary will pivot to the concept of synchronicities and other types of unusual coincidences. He'll certainly share the weirdest things in his own life. We'll also have a cool discussion on the notion of time and dream world, and much more. So please become an AB Prime member, Red Circle subscriber, or patron at Patreon for the full outsider insider's game. Only $6.99 for AB Prime or $4.99 at Red Circle, or whatever you want to pledge on Patreon. Membership to AB Prime or Patreon mid-levels includes full access to more than 500 quality shows. You'll get an invitation to the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group and my Discord channel. Even support in the form of some shekel donations to PayPal or the US mail really helps. There is also a link on the show notes if you want to donate or tip via Stripe. I also have the merch store and an Amazon wish list. Get your popular Not Today Archons t-shirt today. Don't forget my voiceover availability. I'll bring you stellar voiceover results with down-to-earth professionalism, no matter what project or scope you need. Woo! I know that's a lot, but I gotta stay spread out as I dodge the algorithms of the technocracy. Keep in mind I'm also on Rockfin or Odyssey if crypto's your bag. If you need help with all of these choices, just message my ass. I'm always here to help, and I truly appreciate your help. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real.